I'm Kim Gates Flick, and I teach with the School of Visual Arts. And if you don't know, the School of Visual Arts is a place where creative and critical thinkers, makers, educators shape awareness and change the way that our world is seen, experienced, and understood. And it's from that point of view that artistic practice meets sustainability. The Sustainable Development Goals provide a content and context for artistic expression and for progressive pedagogy. These outline goals provide us with real-world research, especially with artists working in the field of environmental and social action. And we create contemporary conversations around sustainability through the visual arts. Ever since the UN agreed upon these goals, universities all over the world are answering the call to action. I think the studio arts are uniquely positioned to assist with implementing these goals. Visual research is a personal and powerful and progressive way of looking at the world. So when you internalize it and then you transform it right into your own language, you can put it out back into the world. So the visual research expands for the artist and for their content, but it also expands into our curriculum, providing all kinds of innovations and solutions to make sure that these goals get implemented. So we start from, in my courses, we start from the simultaneous pursuit of human health and happiness, environmental quality, economic well-being for current and future generations as our definition here at Penn State. As an artist and educator, my research seeks to ground and connect humanity with the natural world, socially, philosophically, economically, and spiritually. This was an installation where I was actually thinking about the silent spring and the way that in which whatever we do to the world, we do to ourselves. So this is a self-portrait called Life Support that was part of an installation at Vermont College. And then we expand artistic practice into sustainable research. And it brings about new objectives for curriculum and cross-discipline collaboration. And when I started to get involved with sustainable research here at Penn State, I also brought with it my own objectives of how I felt we needed to bring these to the curriculum in my own practice. So you can see them here, and they coordinate with the Sustainable Development Goals. But I really want to talk about what we're doing in the Sustainable Studio. So I'm going to, in lieu of time, I'm going to keep moving. I helped to develop the student farm through my place-based practice of working with natural plants. That was how I got involved with it. And soon after, we had our first dye garden. And while it looks like a pretty, beautiful flower bed, those flowers contain an alchemy of color that is ancient and across thousands of generations and cultures and years of cultivation and knowledge. When you look at a dye garden, you're really looking at thousands of people that are anonymous, that have passed on their, that have kept the species alive, that have kept the variety alive, that have kept the makers alive. So to us, materials, methods, and makers became kind of a focus for our curriculum, because at the heart of it, we are about materials. So number 12 really speaks to us. Number 12, the SDG goal. So from the dye garden, we started a sustainable studio class and began with the special topics that quickly led into a fully developed course that I'm proud to say that with my colleague and co-teacher Helen O'Leary, we have brought it into the permanent curriculum now through SOVA. And in this course, we call pigments and natural dyes from our immediate geography and explore the how and the why that we live in our 21st century. And we do this through several different methods, but three that I want to show you today are ongoing research. That the first lesson we learned really was that nature isn't, her timing is totally different than ours. It doesn't always coexist with the semester schedule, you know. So we have these particular ones have been in the making for me more than 3 years. So in our living dye labs, we look at specific plants. And our first one I want to show you here today is madder root. And madder root is a wonderful plant that for thousands of years has been cultivated because it is capable of this catalog of color. So what you're seeing here is the plant, and it takes 3 years for a plant to be even begun to be able to produce enough root in enough dye in its root to be cultivated. And even then you can only take a certain amount until you have enough, to actually work with. And then we use the root, and then the complexity of color that you see here is a 25 or more different colors of dye that it's capable of producing, depending on the method by which it's extracted and how we use it in the dye bath with modifiers and assist and manipulate and coax out the color. Because madder is such a complicated dye plant, it depends on where it's raised, how it's treated, the pH, the soil, how the makers, whether they boil, the temperature. It's so sensitive that there's not even an exact science necessarily to it, that dyers guard their secrets. And so for a lot of years, you couldn't find a lot of things on this. You have to really be a good researcher to find out how to make this kind of a color catalog. It also, most of our dye plants, people don't always know this, they also have a health benefit to them. They're also cultivated for medicinal purposes. So it's easy to totally over harvest or exploit a plant, especially like madder or indigo or any of the other ones that we'll talk about. But it's most famous for its turkey red from Turkey and Iran and Istanbul for those beautiful carpets. Anyway, so we're growing it at the farm. It's in its second year, the root system, and Helen and I also are growing it in our own personal dye gardens as well. Also, besides our living color labs, we also do source studies for global and local. So here you see the indigo, which indigo is a fascinating subject, and it's really complex in a lot of the sustainable history behind it. Like it's most famous for our denim, which is mostly all synthetic now. And a lot of people don't know that the textile industry is the #2 polluter of our waterways. So that was another reason why we talk about, these are all laborious processes, but we might put a dye pot on or sit around an indigo vat and then talk about how throughout history, even the farmers and the artisan were driven to where they had to produce the plant instead of food, and it gave way to the slave labor. Even support of slave trade here in America followed it over here. So there's all kinds of things that you can talk about in terms of inequity and pollution and all kinds of things. I'm sure all of you as sustainable fellows have learned that you start talking about one of the development goals and it just fragments and leads you down a rabbit hole to how this one and that one come to play. And pretty soon you're talking about world politics and you're talking about culture, and the students are engaged in their content. So anyway, so a global source like indigo, we buy from a reputable company, but also we're growing it here. So we have it at the farm. This is the first year that we've actually got some color. So here you can see the little plants growing at the bottom of the farm. At the farm, it's normally a tropical, but the Japanese dyer's knotweed is a tempered plant that can be grown here, a variety here. And here you see our global studies on the wall. And off to the side, this light turquoise green color is our first color from the farm that we got with an ice dyeing process. So we're really encouraged by our findings there and looking forward to next year having knowing now what we know as to when to harvest and how long it needs to be out there. There's all kinds of variables that go into it. And I just, like I said, with the makers are so important and the history of the makers. Most of the time, everything in the textile industry is very labor, a hard life for both workers and craftsmen and farmers. And we can really talk about in our classes that the history of the maker and the humanity that goes into it, and is it safe for them as well, and those choices that we make regarding our materials and what we're willing to place on that value for that color, and what we're not in a lot of cases. The last project I want to share with you here, trying to get done with our time, is the acknowledging our ancestry. And something new at the farm, the student farm, was the indigenous garden. And we had wanted to have some Hopi sunflower seeds. They were part of our very first garden over there at back in 2018, but we didn't always have a good recipe or a good method for it. But through our rare books collection at the library, we were able to get our hands on a couple of old recipes from Hopi, Native American, how they did it for their basketry and their leather making. And this year we had a really great success with those. And I think it's important, as Penn State has their land grant acknowledgement, that this farm puts in this indigenous garden. They put it for the CSAs, but also we have several flowers growing over there that we have from the indigenous population. But also it's important as a grower and as a dye maker to talk about native species and invasive species, and how this sunflower almost got completely extinct and wiped out by larger ones like the mammoth Russians and the birdseed ones. That this isn't the same variety. So they don't produce a dye. They don't produce the medicinal quality that this particular native one does. So we can talk about all those kinds of things in class as well. And here's our results from our Hopi dye sunflower. We had 3 test pots. One, the Chambray blue that you see here, is the as is. This was with a modifier, and we got it coax out this purple color, and this was with an iron modifier that gave these really beautiful steel colors. Almost all the dye is reliant on stuff like pH and what's in the pot and all kinds of stuff. It's really interesting, the type of fibers. There's so many variables that it keeps students engaged just to learn the craft itself. But then when it slows down, it's kind of a slow, there's times of slow and letting things steep, that we can talk about all the different developmental goals. And it does form a community of like-minded individuals about sustainability. Last year, we took our Sustainable Studio class over to Ireland with the Summer Abroad program, and it was so much fun. It was the first time I ever traveled abroad. So for me, it was really a great research experience for me. And here we are, Helen and I, in the Byrne College of Art, and testing our dye pigments and the things we're finding there. So we look forward to expanding that experience for students that want to follow up or do other things. Ireland forever has been a resilient nation, and there's so much goes over there. I was just blown away. I thought I knew, but I didn't know of all the ties to sustainability that were included in this program. It's really a great program for our students to be able to partake in. And like I said, it's a great community. We always come over and try to support the student farm with Harvest Fest and what they do for us to give us back. So we're very thankful to have the Sustainable Studio going on in Sova. And this year we've had a full house. It's one of our popular programs, and we have a lot of students interested in it, and a lot of them that are really using it as their main subject and content base, because it is the conversation of our time, and there's an urgency about it, and students are really engaged with it. So thank you very much for inviting me.